as I said, the first part is going to be on the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013. Before I get into the act and to talk about some provisions of the act, how many of you all know the background of this act or the history behind this act? So I am assuming that many are going to be talking about Vishaka versus state of Rajasthan. That's one part of it. Do you know the history beyond this? Is there anyone who knows the history beyond this? Okay, so I am going to talk about it. And for those for whom it's a repetition, then I would say, please bear with me, but I'm sure that for those who haven't heard of it, it'll be interesting. Vishaka versus state of Rajasthan, the word Vishaka represents a group of NGOs who called them Vishaka and approached the Supreme Court to lay down guidelines for protecting women from sexual harassment at workplaces. Now, the history of this goes back to a particular Anganwadi worker by the name Banwari Devi in Rajasthan, who was appointed to stop child marriages in the state of Rajasthan. And when she went basically from village to village trying to stop child marriages, there was one instance in September 1992 when she went to a particular village to stop a Thakur from getting his daughter married off as a minor. They not only threw her out of that place, they not only ensured that she was not allowed inside and the child was married off. They came back in the evening and in front of her husband raped this lady. This was a gang rape by 6 people. After that, she tried her level best to register a complaint, which was not easy because he was the Thakur of the village. And the worst part is, till today, she's fighting for her justice because they got acquitted in the lower courts. And in this process, for the last 30 years, you actually had 2 people even die before justice came to her. This was one of the grounds on which the Vishaka, the group of NGOs went, and the directions came from the Supreme Court. And there we have the law. Now, many people keep asking me the question, why is the law only for women? It's because women went and asked for it. And well, the government could have made it a neutral law, but nothing stopped the men from going there and asking for a law too. So let me take you, once we're done with the history, I want to ask these 2 questions. I would request people to, only those who don't agree with what I'm saying to just raise their hands, and I would request Peterson to help me out, but I'm not taking this up now. I will take this up at a later point in time. So how many of you agree with me that an organization with less than 10 employees do not have to carry out any compliance under the Posh Act? Just want to know if there anybody who doesn't agree with what I'm saying. Do we have any, Peterson?
No, we do not have any. I believe all agree to the question that we need to have carry out compliances under the Posh Act.
My question is, how many of you agree that an organization with less than 10 employees do not have to carry out any compliance under the Posh Act?
Correct. So they don't agree with that. They said that they need to have the compliance.
So that's what
I believe.
That's
everybody.
For all? Wow. Okay.
Yes, I just see one comment from Aditi. I don't agree.
Okay. So she's the only one who doesn't agree. Rest of them agree with what I'm saying?
So there is other by Raki, I don't agree. Krishna Vini, who says, as per the act, it is not applicable. That's what she's saying. Then Divyanshu saying that she doesn't agree.
Okay. Thank you.
So Akansha, the next one is more than 10.
Yeah. Okay. Great. How many of you also agree? Oh, okay. How many of, let me just go back. How many of you also agree that organizations having only male employees, they need not comply with the provisions of Posh? Anyone disagreeing with me?
I agree.
Okay.
We've
So
got a comment saying I agree.
Okay.
agree on this, Divyanshu?
Okay. So I'll come back on this later on. I'm just going ahead with this thing. So I know most of you all are aware of the obligation that an employer has under the Act, but I'm just going to run you through because it's a part of my job to keep you all aware of it. And there's a vast subject. So I'm taking you through being HR representatives, being responsible for ensuring that it is implemented in the company. I'm just going to run you through the obligations of the employer. So the first is to keep it, the first obligation of an employer is to keep the workplace free from harassment, formulate and widely disseminate an internal policy against sexual harassment, and display at any conspicuous place in the workplace the penal consequences in case of acts of harassment, and to treat sexual harassment as a misconduct under the rules and to initiate action for such misconduct. We all already know that if you have employees, if you have more than 10 employees working in the company, then the employer has to constitute an IC. Now here I go back to the question that I asked earlier, where I said, if you have only male employees, then you do not have to comply with this, the provisions. Quite a few people agreed with what I said, and here is my take on this. The law says if the company has more than 10 employees, it does not specify that it has to be women employees. And this is something that I have personally experienced in several companies. And we are talking about 8 years after the act came into force. Now, even if a company has just 10 male employees, it is still required to set up an internal committee because of the fact that there are possibilities that a woman comes into this organization from outside to visit them for some work. It could be as a vendor, it could be as a housekeeping, it could be as anything, or it could have employees from this company going over to another organization to perform certain services and could come in contact with some women. And when an act of harassment happens by this employee, then you need to have an internal committee that can carry out the investigation, because their company IC cannot take action against your company IC. So the important aspect, and this is something I have seen happening, and that's the reason why I asked that question. So every company, irrespective of whether it's women or men, having more than 10 employees has to set up an internal committee. It needs to have a presiding officer, preferably someone who's at the senior most level. Then you need other members. Other members can be from amongst the employees, but the law generally says it has to be people who are committed to the cause of women, or who have experience in social work, or have legal knowledge. I know that may not be possible in all organizations. In such cases, just pick up another 2 women who wouldn't mind being a part of this committee, or a man and a woman who don't mind being a part of the committee. But preferably choose someone who's interested. There are many times people come in feeling very embarrassed to even be a part of this committee. Avoid choosing such people. And most importantly, external member, someone who has who's amongst a either from an NGO, someone who's committed to the cause of women, or who have experience in sexual harassment related issues. Now, there is a further obligation of the employer to ensure that in such a committee, there's not less than 1/2 of the IC members are women. Display at any conspicuous place in the workplace the order that constitutes the setting up of the internal committee. And you have to declare all the names of the internal committee members with their contact details, especially the contact details of the presiding officer, so that they can easily access them. Then you need to organize workshops and awareness programs at regular intervals. Now, this is a very, very important aspect, because I'm going to get into that discussion at a later point of time. Then also organize orientation programs for members of the IC where the number of employees are 10 or more. So this is what I've covered. This is the obligation of the employer. Additionally, as an employer, they are duty bound to provide necessary facilities to the IC for dealing with complaint and conducting an inquiry. The reason they have put this obligation is They need to ensure that the separate room is given. They need to ensure that time off is given to the IC members as well as the perpetuator, as well as the person who's been the victim. They have to assist in securing attendance of the perpetuator and the witness before the IC. That's also the job of the employer. Then they have to make available to the IC such information as they may need to have the sexual with regard to the sexual harassment that has been filed. Excuse me. Monitor the timely submission of reports by IC. So that's also another job of the employer. They have to ensure that, because it's a time-bound process, they have to ensure it is done within that period of time. And most importantly, the employer has to act on the recommendation of the IC and inform the IC when the action has been taken. In addition to that, we have the annual report, that is which has to be filed every year at the end of the calendar year. And the employer has to ensure that information related to sexual harassment cases, if any, that have been filed, when was it disposed, how many days did it take, all of those details need to be contained therein. This also has to be filed by the internal committee. And most importantly, I'm sure all of you all know that the Companies Act amendment rules further has made it mandatory for the report of the board to contain a statement that the company has complied with the provisions of the IC. So these are by and large the obligations of an employer with respect to the Posh Act. And another important aspect that actually comes up is ensuring confidentiality is maintained when it comes to complaints of sexual harassment. In fact, the law has gone a step further, and this is one of the first laws that I've come across where they've actually spoken about what is the kind of liability that can pass on to the person who is violating these obligations. They actually have a penalty of rupees 5,000 for each instance of default against the IC members. So it's important for the employer to ensure that all the IC members as well as the people involved in the sexual harassment particular matter have all signed a confidentiality agreement. Now I'm going to the most important aspect, which in my opinion is something that is not there at all in most of the organizations, and that is, why has the authority made it mandatory for organizations to carry out awareness program on sexual harassment of women at workplace? I would, today, this morning when I was going through Instagram, I came across a very disturbing post. In fact, it was in the Jagran News where they spoke about a PT master in a school who apparently laced the tea of a sub-inspector, lady sub-inspector, with sleeping pills. After she took it, he took pictures of her when he raped her, and he continued to use that against a lady sub-inspector for a long period of time. Unable to bear the harassment, the sub-inspector committed suicide on the 1st of January 2021. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about a situation which happened as recently as 22 days ago. And we are talking about a sub-inspector and a teacher in a school. So we are talking about people who are educated, people who are in the society, people who are amongst us. So why is it important, and why are we talking about an awareness program that needs to be done on a regular basis? One second. I think we're having some problem here. One second.
Yeah, we are able to see your screen.
Okay.
Yes.
So all of us know that we are a patriarchal society. And one of this toughest job that all of us face is the fact that there's a lot of biases, harassments, and discriminations which are a part of our culture. I do not know how the new generation looks at it, but I can tell you from the generation that I come from, the families that we all came from, a lot of importance were given to the male child, a lot of importance, the way the female child was treated at home to way the male was treated, whether it came to education, whether it came to giving them, when it came to getting them married, what was expected of them in the society. Now, all of this has been laid down in our culture. We're talking about way back in 500 years. And to take this away and to try and make it a more sensitized culture, we need to start right from our homes to the schools, to the colleges, and then to workplace. Unfortunately, we have a law which has come in very strongly for the workplace, and therefore we have people who have got used to a certain mindset, maybe at home, maybe at work, maybe in the society, and we need to change their mindset. And again, I'm not talking about maybe me and you who come from families, who come from, who are highly educated, who know what we are talking about and are very sensitive to it. But in every place that we talk about, we will have those elements who form a part of our society, somewhere around us, someone right next to us, who need to be sensitized and told that this is not something that is okay at a workplace. And therefore, it becomes very important for us to carry on regular sensitization session. Most important point to remember is sensitizing and becoming mindful. It cannot be in an overnight transformation. It cannot happen overnight. It's not like I carry out one sensitization session, just a one-off sensitization, and the next day all the employees have understood what is right and what is wrong. Now, I'll tell you, I am going to take the liberty to talk about quite a few of myself in my own practice in the last 8 years. I've come across instances where companies do, I think the last one some of them have done is only in 2015. And they do not even want to talk about the subject. The subject is a taboo for them. They do not want to educate the employees in terms of what they need to do. And many times employees do not understand where to draw a line. I'd like to talk about one particular instance of sexual harassment which I came across, where three employees were from a particular state. So language wise, they were very comfortable with each other. And what started as talking to each other in the same language subsequently went to both all three of them going out, which involved two female colleagues and one male colleague. And when they went out, they went out to parties, they went out to hotels. And one such instance, when they were sitting in the office and it was a party after office, the male apparently made a statement that her dress neckline was very low. And at that point in time, the girl did not like what he said, and she immediately took objection to it. But he did not know where to draw a line. And two other instances like this, by then the girl had got irritated and she had filed a case of sexual harassment against the boy. And naturally, he had made the statement. Though I'm not going into the intention, I'm not going into the basis on which it happened. But the law is very clear that if such an act has happened, then it amounts to sexual harassment. And he had to lose his job. So what I'm trying to say is maybe it would have been a good idea if they had done a sensitization session and they told the employee that even for fun, if it's a colleague, you cannot make the statement. I've come across another instance where when I was doing a training and someone asked me a question whether consensual sex would also amount to sexual harassment. One of the ladies who happened to be a part of the HR department immediately got up and said, "No, it doesn't." And that's where I would like to draw all of your attention. Consensual sex, yes, affair is not a part of sexual harassment at workplace. True. But what if it is a situation where a person who's having the affair is at a higher level and the person with whom he is having an affair is reporting to them? Now, this can clearly come under the definition of power play. India is not there. Of course, India still has the taboo. People still think a lot, but times are changing and we need to be mindful of that. You, I'm sure, have heard of Fanish Murthy's case, right? Which in America became a major issue, and he got involved in sexual harassment related issues on two occasions. And it was a consensual affair. but it was a consensual affair that went wrong, and it was mainly because he held the position of power that even though it was consensual, it was considered as an act of harassment, and he had to lose his job. So this becomes a very important aspect that needs to be driven, and this can happen only with constant education. Someone who's been taught very differently at home to say, you're a woman, how does it matter, you're not very smart, may actually continue to hold that at the workplace. So that's where the importance of conducting awareness program arises. Now, again, why do we still see so many instances of harassment? I have already started explaining it to you. Here I would like to, I don't know how many of y'all read about this article. It came, I think around 10 to 15 days ago. I happened to read this in the newspaper. We're talking about an Indian subsidiary in the USA, which had a few ex-employees file a case against them for fostering an environment of harassment. Now, what do you think happened there? When I read the details, it spoke about, apparently it had women employees were put below male employees who had less qualification. The work done by the women were taken by these men and shown as the work done by them. And when these women approached the seniors talking about, unfair treatment at work, apparently the seniors said, it's a part of Indian culture, it's okay. And the people who filed the case, the lawyers were actually saying, we'll manage to get a very good compensation from the employer. Now, we are looking at some atmosphere like this in the years to come. And remember, we have the youngest population with us in India. We know that the growing India is the place to be in right now. And there are laws now coming out which are going to be looking at things very differently from what it was looked at in the last 50 years. So it's very important for people to consider awareness programs very seriously. Now, why doesn't it happen? My experience, and I'm talking basically about what I have seen so far, most companies treat compliance under Posh Act as any other compliance, a tick off the list. Now, we know that when it comes to taxes, when it comes to company law, when it comes to other laws, there are certain forms that I need to file. I just fill it up and the job is done. But this is a different law altogether, and the compliance under this act has to be treated differently. So my personal experience has been, we've done an awareness session and we are done with it. In fact, this year, very interestingly, some of my clients, when they went to file the annual returns, one of the authority actually asked them, why haven't you filed, how many times have you done the awareness session, and why was it only once a year? So these are things, I'm sure when COVID settles down and there are more people who are more responsible, you can expect them to ask such questions. Awareness programs consist of several provisions of the Posh Act. Employees are educated upon the provisions without really understanding the implications. Now, this is again something that I've seen in a few of the places where I'm an external member, where the person in the company just rolls out something that they find either on the net or somewhere else, picks up different provisions of law, puts it, and they have one session where the employees are shown that and they walk out. There is no possibility of employees transparently discussing it, talking about it, which gives a comfort level to everyone that this is a topic that is not something that should not even be discussed. And most importantly, I think the last of the things that I've seen is they show short videos, and these videos are shown several times over, and certain questions are asked. So there is no, there's nothing that the employee gets to see new. So after some time, if you tell an employee it's a Posh awareness program, they're not interested anymore because they know it's going to be the same thing that is going to be told to them several times over. Now, what can change this mindset? Now, this is something that I have, personally experienced to say this is how it can work. So we are talking about consistent programs to build awareness. So that has to be consistently done every time, regularly, so that people are aware of what is happening. incremental consistent education is the word that I use, because just as I said, now it's important for employees to consistently talk about it. After you talk about it, what is that additional learning I have, and how can learning happen? For example, if you have three people who are sitting together and you start talking about it, someone will talk about what had happened in another organization. Someone will talk about their own personal experience, and that's how learning happens. So incremental, consistent education is very important. And most importantly, employers pledge not to treat this awareness program as a tick mark off its list of compliances. It needs to be taken seriously. Now you have people spending lots of money on training their employees in leadership, on everything else. But this is something that I believe, and I've seen several times, to be something that's always treated separately. So with this, I end my part on Posh, because with the time that I've been allotted, this is what I have managed to cover, and to tell you that what is very important is to ensure that this is taken up as a serious part of the Posh awareness, and people are educated to make a workplace free from sexual harassment. I'll now move on to gender equity. Now, I'm sure all of you have seen pictures like this on the net, in your WhatsApp, on Facebook, on Instagram, everywhere. Now, this is a hot topic, and I'm sure everybody around is talking about it. And why has it gained so much of importance over the last few years, when all this while we were talking about equality? Now, where did equity turn up? So let me talk about what gender equity is. Now, the concept of gender equity refers to fairness of treatment for women and men according to their respective needs. So fairness can include treatment, or treatment that is either the same or that is different, but is considered equivalent considering the specific needs. It means when we use the word equality, or let me come to that later once we have understood the definitions properly. Then we are talking about gender equality. Gender equality means that different behavior, aspiration, and the needs of men and women are considered, valued, and favored equally. But it does not mean that men and women have to become the same. But their rights, responsibilities, and opportunities will not depend on whether they are born male or female. Now, I think this is the fundamental aim of every organization, society, world, universe, wherever you take it. This is now the single most thing that everyone wants to achieve. Everybody gets the same opportunities, irrespective of whether they belong to the same gender, race, caste, culture, whatever it is. So I'm going to limit it only to gender equality right here. So let me show you a small difference between what gender equity is and gender equality is. Now, gender equality includes ensuring rights, responsibilities, and opportunities are equal for men and women. And gender equity is ensuring fair treatment of men and women according to their respective needs. I'll give a small example. I do not know how relevant it will be, but that's the simplest thing that I could think of. If a company appoints two software engineers, where you have the lady who just has a newborn baby, and a male, of course, who's doesn't have any such responsibility, and we are looking at equality. Of course, equality is that they're both appointed as senior software development officers, both have the same rights, responsibilities, paycheck, everything is the same. Now, where does gender equity come in? Now, gender equity comes in, there's a responsibility on women. I mean, life is not only about work. There is a social responsibility as well. And that includes the woman gives birth to the baby and is responsible to bring up her family. Now, while we agree that the responsibilities, rights, and opportunities should be equal to both the genders, we have a situation where this lady has a small baby. So what do we do? When equity comes in, you're giving a fair treatment by giving her flexible work times and a possibility of nursing the child and other things that are needed under the law, so that it is a fair treatment that she gets, as long as she ensures that the the thing is met. She finishes the project on time. Making it conducive for all genders to freely develop their personal abilities and make choices without limitations set by stereotypical views, rigid gender roles, and prejudices. As I said, that's the final aim of gender equality. And equity talks about making it conducive for all genders to seek specific support and help based on their needs. So this is where it plays a very important role, that we need to make some small tweaks to ensure that if a person is at a disadvantageous level, then they are given that small push to ensure that they are finally equal together. In case of gender equality, it aims to create a level playing field for both men and women while ignoring the historical disadvantages that certain genders inherited. And that's the problem that everybody faced. At one point in time, all organizations and corporates were talking about equality and realized that it's not possible because of certain disadvantages that any of the genders have been placed at. What does equity do? It focuses on developing the support system for such gender to bridge the gender gap. End result of equality is creating the same starting line for everyone. And in case of equity, it's a finish line is the same. Naturally, all of them are going to reach that point where everything is the same for everybody, but the starting may be tweaked for their respective needs. As I said, equality is the end goal and equity is the means to get there. Now, we are talking about equity, and why are we talking about equity, and why are we talking about carving out a certain niche for the people to ensure that equity is and equality becomes a part of our workplace? It's important to understand the benefits of gender diversity at workplaces. And I'm sure many of you sitting here are already aware, but I'm going to run through some experience that I have gained out of this. So based on multiple studies in case of McKinsey, Gallup, and several universities who carried out studies on this, here are some important benefits of gender diversity. One is when you have better economy, you have better buying power. So when you have a husband and wife who are both working from a house, you know that they have more money. More money means there's more buying, which means the economy becomes better. Improved productivity. Several studies have shown that when you have diversity at workplaces, there is possibility of diverse thinking, and as a result, the productivity increases. There's increased growth and innovation. There is widens the talent pool because you're not restricted to only one set of people. You know that you can get men, you can get women, you can get people from with physical disability. So there's option for a lot of things that you can do when there is diversity and multiple perspectives. We all know that if you have a office which is just men, they think in one direction. If you have a woman coming in and giving in her perspective, it can help see a holistic view rather than a very straightforward view. Now I'm going to quickly run through gender equality statistics. These are some of the latest information that I've managed to gather. So as per the UN, one second. United Nations Women Equality Statistics, it shows that violence against women, in 1993, the UN General Assembly had declared, on providing a framework for elimination of violence. But more than 25 years later, 1 out of 3 women still experience physical or sexual violence, mostly by an intimate partner. And that's a very important point to reckon. Wages. Even though we have 49% of working age women in labor, when compared to 75% of the working age, there is an improvement already from what it was before. Women still earn 16% less than men, even for the same work that they do. All developing regions have almost achieved gender parity when it comes to primary education, but as education widens and it goes to higher education, women drop out because of familial obligations, and for every 100 men, there are only 70 women who proceed to higher education. Now we all know about the CEOs, the women at top. We have 37 women CEOs today when compared to only 1 in 1998, so that's good news. but it's still a mere 7% of all the CEOs that we have on the list. So we have still a long way to go. Key findings, this is very important from the International Labour Organization's report in 2019. There are 1.3 billion women in workforce in 2018 as compared to 2 billion men. It's less than 2% improvement in the last 27 years. And remember, when we're talking about 1.3 billion women, we are also talking about women at the lowest levels. We are not talking about the women at the higher rung. Women's pay is 20% lower than the men's as a global average. I just now spoke about it. And women remain underrepresented at the top, a situation that has changed very little in the last 30 years. We have less than 1/3 of managers are women. Motherhood leadership penalty, only 25% of managers with children under the age of 6 years of age are women. Women's share rises to 31% for managers without young children. We are talking about the global role. In India, women with children under the age of 6 make up just 10.2% of the managers, whereas women with no children make up 16.3% of the managers. In contrast, you have 89% managers with children under 6 years of age are men, while percentage is 83.7 with men with no children. So can you see the contrast here? Actually, men without children seem to be at a lower position of getting a managerial position than the other way around. In the last 20 years, the amount of time that women have spent on unpaid care and domestic work has hardly fallen, and that of men has increased by just 8 minutes a day. At this pace of change, it will take more than 200 years to achieve equality in the time spent in unpaid care work. So how can organizations implement gender equity? Now, before I go to gender equity, so how, I'd like to talk about the why. Internationally and even in India, we all know the importance of diversity and equality. And I think all of us have understood it's an everyday topic. I'm sure if you go on LinkedIn, you'll find 10 other people who are talking on the same subject. Organizations are also doing their best to provide women a level playing field, and yet there are gaps. And why are we seeing the gaps, especially in India? So there's some barriers which I thought I should pen down. One is women have more responsibilities and more family responsibilities. There's lack of leadership training for women. Men are not encouraged to take leave for family responsibilities. And management generally generally management work is viewed as a man's job. These are some of the barriers that we face in India whenever we look at establishing equality. Now, here are some important steps organizations could consider to take to encourage policies of equity. Make pay equity a priority. I mean, this is, I think, a very important aspect. We all know that there is a lot of difference in pay, and I can tell you personally, I come from a field which is male dominated. Back then, 23 years ago, I had a situation where I did 75% of the work, but my senior gave an extra salary to the guy who did not even know how to draft an affidavit, because they felt he was a family man and he had more responsibilities than I had. So we're talking about something that has been personally experienced by me also. Encourage mentorship and leadership programs for women. This is a very important aspect, and I'm sure many companies have taken this up. Formulate and advocate strict anti-harassment and bias policy. Encourage male employees to take leave for family responsibilities. Let it not be that, oh, there's a woman in the house and why she alone should do it. Let's start looking at encouraging men also to start taking it up. Formulate and encourage paternity leave policies. This is something many companies are taking up, but let's take it up seriously. And last of all, recognize that each person comes from a different situation and formulate policies to suit needs of people rather than making it a uniform policy. To to ensure that we do not, I have enough time to answer questions, I am going to cut short with this. If there's any question that anyone would like to ask, I would be happy to take that up. Right.
This was with reference to the earlier questions, like the earlier slide that we had shared.
Right.
Won't the case of the sub-inspector, you had specified one, the case that was mentioned by you. So she had the question related to the same. Ma'am, won't the case of sub-inspector come under cyber law as well?
Are you talking about cyber law because of the fact that he threatened to share it, or he shared it? Because if he's not shared it and he's only threatening to share it, I don't think the cyber law is going to come into effect. It will be more from the perspective of blackmailing that will be actually accounted for. So I could not get enough information to see whether he actually decided to post it somewhere. From what I read, it was mainly telling them, threatening her that he would post it somewhere if she did not comply with him. And I think he also convinced her to pay some money to him. So that's it was more of a blackmail is what I see.
Thank you, Anupama. We have our next question from Shine. If an harassed employee is not convinced with the outcome of IC inquiry and final report, whether, just a second, whether the employee can file a police complaint further.
Nothing stops the employee from filing a police complaint. But there's also a possibility to take recourse to file an appeal as well before the court. So there is, if the only thing that you have to remember is a 90-day period would have elapsed by the time the inquiry has taken place, and then you go and file a police complaint. You might lose critical information and time. In the alternative, pursuing an appeal would make more sense, because you know that it's a logical sequence to the situation. So you have the inquiry carried out, you're not happy with what has been done, you can always carry it on in an appeal.
Okay, so our next question is from Akansha Thakur. What are your views ruled by Bombay High Court judgment yesterday, touching body parts without skin-to-skin contact is not a sexual assault?
Yeah, okay. So I do not know how many of you all actually got a chance to read through the whole thing. The Bombay High Court has looked at it only from the perspective of the POCSO Act, and also from the perspective of molestation, which is what has happened. Now, if they go by the provisions of the POCSO Act, basically the need to touch them and to actually commit a certain act is a requirement to book them under the particular act and to hold them responsible. The Bombay High Court has clearly held it to be an act of molestation under IPC and has changed it from 3 years to 1 year. Now, this is something that I would actually try to take the opportunity to express over here. Often it happens that something comes on media, it is reported somewhere, people understand, and there's a whole lot of people going together. For example, we all know in Nirbhaya's case, there was a huge outcry about the minor being let scot-free. Now, let's for a moment forget about what is right and what is wrong, what the judge thought. I'm not going to comment on that. But we have to look at it always. The law's job, if it didn't do it, then we would all be in a huge mess, has to be to interpret the executive's law that is already in force. So if the POCSO Act is talking about actual need to touch, without the clothes or to actually commit an act, then the judge has to interpret that accordingly. And you cannot, because of pressure, to say, oh, it's such a, I can agree that the act was not right, whether it was with or without, it is definitely a thing. But what the judge has done is to go by the provisions of law. That's the way I see it. They've not said there's no offense committed. They've said the section under which it has been booked is different. That's all.
Okay, thank you so much, Anupama. There was, pertaining to the question that had come up from Aditi earlier, she highlighted that this was specifically towards the photography aspects. like she was trying to put it with the purview of photography.
So I'm not too sure that just taking a photograph actually comes under cyber law, though I am not an expert at it and I've not gone into it. I can definitely look that up and maybe pass on that information to Peterson. But as far as I know, taking a picture doesn't come under cyber law.
Okay. Thank you so much, Anupama. We have another question. We are in the 21st century and still we can't think of gender equality. We still are discussing this. Who is responsible for this society or the sticky mindset which is not changing from a particular perception?
Many times I keep saying it starts from our homes, and often it's the women who started it. So just for people to know, often you would have your the mothers, the grandmothers, the great grandmothers who would have set the standards about where equality starts and where it is, and that continues from the person who's brought up in that house, goes to the school as a teacher, passes on the same mindset to the children. So if you ask, maybe if we actually go looking at it, the roots would have come from there. But whatever it is, each one comes with a different background, different mindset, and that mindset to change needs people to be open to change. And in India, that is rather tough, because we believe, while in one place we want to believe that we are very forward and we do a lot of things maybe behind closed doors, when it comes to out in the society, we behave that we are very good and we follow certain policies and we're very closed. We don't like to discuss a lot of things. So I think that mindset needs to change.
Absolutely, and that's the bitter reality that we all are in. Um, with this, we have our next question. Has the COVID-19 pandemic driven gender equality and equity back by a decade?
Not really. Not really. I haven't seen that happening. In fact, maybe it's given. This is my personal experience from listening to other ladies friends who believe that because of the pandemic and the fact that organizations have actually realized that work can be actually made flexible and women can be working from home also, and there's a possibility. I understand from many that organizations are really looking at hiring women at a larger scale because flexibility is now more understandable than it was before.
Absolutely. So we have a next question from Shine. Can you share some cases where when an employee or when an male employee has been sexually harassed?
Okay, this is a very difficult, there has been, let me put it this way, most of the men, I mean, this is a statement that I'm making, forgive me if you don't agree with it. I'm yet to see a person who will be open enough to come out somewhere in the open and say, I've been harassed by a woman, except there is a Hindi movie which came out. I don't remember the name of the movie. Maybe
I believe
like
it's Aetras.
Yeah,
I think so.
absolutely. So maybe someone gets the right kind of thing to walk up and say. Till now, in my personal experience, I've not had a situation where at workplace someone has gone up to say that they've been harassed. But at homes, I have come across instances where it has happened, where men have actually approached police stations saying that they've been harassed by the women. So they should start doing that at workplaces also. Now, I see it from a very neutral point of view. It doesn't really matter whether it's a male or a female. An act of harassment is an act of harassment. Yes.
Okay, so this takes us to our next question. How do you think we can make Posh successful in making it Posh-free work environment?
Like I said, the first thing that has to happen is organizations need to treat it not as a taboo. 90% of the time people feel, oh my God, it's like I went to an institute where I spoke to the dean, and while talking to him, I said, I heard that you were very interested in ensuring that, Posh was fully implemented. He said, oh yes, the minute I hear that someone is harassed, I remove them from work. And I was so shocked. I said, that's not so what you're supposed to be doing, because nobody wants to talk about the subject. The important thing is the day you can get down to talk on the subject without the employer feeling like as though he's committed an act because some two employees, it happened between two other employees. Until then, it's not going to come into force. So if you want to have a situation where it's going to be accepted and we're going to have a harassment-free workplace, then be open about it, talk openly, discuss, and don't feel like it's a taboo topic at all.
Okay, so we have been receiving questions out here. We'll take one last question, keeping the time constraints in mind. How gender equality is different from women empowerment?
Okay, so when you use the word gender, right now in India, it is being used from the perspective of women only. So when we talk about gender equality or equity, we are most often speaking about women, and women empowerment is in a way the same end result that we are going to ensure that women are given the rights that they are entitled to. So technically, the word gender equality should not be limited only to women. But the way we are, because of the fact that we are so far behind, women are so way behind in every aspect. When we use the word, we always refer to women. That's why in many places today also I tried to make it a point to say gender, use the word to say either of the gender, because we are having transgenders, we have other people with disabilities, so everyone coming into workforce, and equality generally has to be applicable to everyone across. Now women empowerment becomes a major topic of discussion because of the fact that in most of the places, considering the fact that physically women are weak and the fact that family responsibilities takes them away from financial independence, that it over the period of time, society is realizing that if they did not give importance to women and get have women empowered, we would have this huge gender male population increasing, and there's not enough women, the women population going down, the girl population going down. So technically, as of now, if you ask me, both are the same. But maybe when women get better empowered and are in workplaces, then gender equality can have a much wider meaning. But as of now, if you ask me, both mean the same. And whenever we talk about women equality, gender equality, we are talking about women only.